Egypt plans to send 44 people, including some Americans, to trial. Among them, Sam LaHood, the son of U.S. Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood. The State Department calling these developments troubling and saying it's working to learn more from the Egyptian government. Meanwhile, violent outbursts continue in Egypt across the country there. More than 70 people killed in a riot at a soccer game about a week ago. And now the U.S. is threatening to cut off more than $1 billion in aid. Bringing us information and his expertise on that region, Dr. Walid Phares, Fox News Middle East and terrorism analyst and author of The Coming Revolution, The Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East. Dr. Phares, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Harrison.
First of all, the 19 Americans in this group, prosecutors in Egypt want to go after. What did they do wrong?
Well, Harrison, this is a very troubling story. We're talking about an event that never happened 30 years ago. For 30 years, some of these NGOs, the International Republican Institute, the Democratic National Institute, and other human rights groups, American-based, international-based, have been operating in Egypt for years. The IRI, who is basically led by Mr. LaHood, was founded in 2005 in Egypt, and yet never before it happened. Even during the year after the collapse of the regime, the past regime, Mubarak regime, nobody attacked them. So the question is, what prompted the military council, the security forces, to raid those agencies a couple of weeks ago, and now to ban travel for these Americans and to prosecute them? Well, the idea is that this is happening after the elections, after the Muslim Brotherhood took over the parliament. So the military council seemed to be executing an operation so that they would push those NGOs outside the country so that the next government, which will be formed by the Muslim Brotherhood, doesn't have to do it.
I want to ask you more about these new people who've taken over in a moment, but for us, the urgency is bringing those Americans home. What can the U.S. do to make that happen?
Well, you know, we have been funding the armed forces of Egypt for the last decades. So the minimum would be that the President of the United States and congressional leaders, the State Department, would phone them, would phone those leaders and tell them, what are you doing? We are allies, and these agencies basically are not spy agencies. These are democracy-promoting agencies that help your own people get rid of the dictator that you are replacing. So there must be some frank talk. And also there should be an address to the American public to explain that this is a very serious issue.
All right. Now, I have read that you have an idea that there's like a two-tier plan with the people who are now in charge in Egypt. Tell us more about that government and what you think their plans are.
It's very simple. The government now is controlled by the Military Council of Egypt. That military council used to receive their funding from the president of Egypt, last regime. Now the next government, which is going to receive the funding from the United States and from the international community, is basically going to tell the military no more democracy NGOs in Egypt. Why? Because those who are going to form that government are the Muslim Brotherhood. They don't want to see these NGOs for the simple reason that if the next government is going to act as an authoritarian, those agencies will be training the next generations of youth that would rise again and do, to them what has been done before to Mubarak.
Dr. Phares, you and I have been talking for 10 months since this whole thing blew up in the Middle East with the so-called Arab Spring. And you kind of telegraphed that we should be on the lookout for this sort of thing, that when these countries see uprisings and new governments take place, that democracy may not really be what they want.
Absolutely. And what we have discussed, you and I, on this show and many times, is that when a dictator goes down, it doesn't mean necessarily that the next government is going to be a democratic government. The next government is going to be controlled by the most organized forces. And in Egypt, unfortunately, those who started the democratic movement, the youth, the laptop people, the Google people, are not the ones who are forming the government. The seculars are not in charge of Egypt's revolt. Now it's the Muslim Brotherhood.
All right, real quickly, the best chance of getting these Americans home?
They will have to be back home soon. Otherwise, this is going to be transformed into a long-term crisis between Washington and Cairo. And I don't think it's in the interest neither of the government in Egypt nor of our administration for this crisis to last more than 3 to 4 weeks.
Very interesting. It'll be really interesting to see exactly what this Egyptian government wants in return for making that happen. Walid Phares joining us tonight. Doctor, thank you.
Thank you.